We're now joined by the founder and director of Restless Beings, a UK-based human rights group, Mabrur Ahmed. Mabrur, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. I remember when this all started, you know, soon after the election, Aung San Suu Kyi had won and she was immediately detained, and we saw them start to, you know, find charges against her. One of them, I think, was having walkie-talkies or something like that. And I just wonder, is this whole thing a sham, or are there genuinely laws broken here?
Well, I mean, obviously there must be a law there that's been broken. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to try her even if it is a sham court, they wouldn't be able to try her in such a thing. They can't just make up laws out of nowhere. I think that the key thing here is that a lot of these laws are either draconian old laws that are completely out of context, or, you know, the slightly newer laws, for example, COVID laws, etc., which have just been completely overwhelmed in a sense, where the whole country was up in arms when the coup happened. It wasn't so much so just that Aung San Suu Kyi was the only one who broke the COVID rules. But even then, you know, to take this all the way to court, all the way to prison, if you like, is beyond the realms of what we would normally accept as a legitimate court, as a legitimate trial, or anything which is trying to uphold any rule of law anywhere in the world. Even this doesn't even pass as something which can be held in a school or a playground as some sort of a court or some sort of a law. It is completely sham. It is completely being blown way out of proportion. But I think we should really try and focus our thoughts and understand that this isn't really about a court trial. It's not really about the law. It's about the military junta saying that this is our country and there is very little that anyone, let alone Suu Kyi, can do about it.
What kind of calculation might be going through the military? Because what they're doing is martyring Aung San Suu Kyi, and that, you know, her presence becomes more symbolic in prison than perhaps she might have been outside. So that this is actually, I don't know how it serves them.
Yeah, I know what you're trying to say, in a sense that by her being behind so-called bars or under law, essentially builds her legend, if you like, her mythological symbolism. But that's just not the case, unfortunately. Yes, of course, within Myanmar, within Burma, people will be desperate for her to come out, because she, I suppose, represents the last hope of what a country free of military rule looks like. But the reality of it is that, you know, this is not the first time she's been held under arrest or under house arrest, if you like. She has been for a large part of her life, for 20 plus years, from 1990s onwards, held under house arrest. And then even at that time, it was because of a victory in a so-called democratic election. Burma has, in a sense, only known military rule. It's only known the strong fist of junta leadership. It has flirted a number of times with the idea of democracy and the idea of freedom for press, for education, for people's basic human rights, I suppose. But it hasn't actually ever materialized. Even when Suu Kyi was out of prison, even when she was, you know, regarded as the state councillor, de facto leader, she was still being like a puppet on strings, almost being pulled by the military, and it was from their leadership, really, that, I mean, even when we talk about the Rohingya genocide, for example, her appearance at the International Court of Justice, it's all playing into the hands of the military. It's all kind of motivated and driven by the military. And at the end of the day, there hasn't really been any time where Suu Kyi, or any leader for that matter, outside of the military for the last almost 50 or 60 years, have led policy or governance in any meaningful way in Burma, in Myanmar. It's almost exclusively been through military force and rule.
Has the international community been sufficiently outraged to do something about it, isolate Myanmar and make it impossible for them to run this junta? It seems as if, yes, for 5 minutes, shock, horror, dismay, but it's quickly become another story.
Well, I mean, this is just a proxy, to be honest with you. Myanmar, so long as it has its elder brother in China and its unilateral support, it doesn't really matter what the rest of the international community says. It's what the international community does. And unfortunately, in this case, the international community, as with many other cases, is unable to actually do anything. So there's been lots of condemnation from the UN, for example, from human rights organizations, even from certain foreign departments in different countries across the world. But until and unless China withdraws its support from the military rule, Myanmar will continue to be ruled by them, by the military. It retains popular success, but from China, and like I said, until and unless that changes, the only real international community or the only real international influence that Myanmar will abide by is the withdrawal of Chinese support. That's not likely to happen probably ever, to be honest with you, simply because of the proximity of Myanmar to China, but also because, like I said, and it's the first word that I use in response to this question, these are proxies. This is a proxy battle. So it's not really about Myanmar. It's not really about Burma. And I know that sounds incredibly short-sighted of me or very angular of me, but that's the absolute reality. This is not a country which is going to geopolitically or from mineral level or from any economic level impact foreign policies and domestic policies around the world. This is simply for the international community an area, an opportunity perhaps, where China can weaken its grip on its surrounding influence in the surrounding countries. But China is not about to let up. China will remain strong as an ally with Myanmar. And unfortunately, what that really means is that for the people of Myanmar, unrelenting violations of human rights, but also increasing wantonness in terms of violence and in terms of an abandonment of any type of law.
What's in it for China to keep the military junta going?
Well, first and foremost, from an economic perspective, of course, there's huge investment already that China has made in Myanmar. It's another way to kind of control territory around itself without directly, having to invade or have any ground troops there. But also at the same time, Myanmar will China will be Myanmar's largest trading partner for generations to come, so long as China retains its support of the military of the military that's in charge there. Apart from that, not a great deal, to be honest with you. There's not a great deal that China will benefit from Myanmar being under their control. But it is, of course, about territory. It's about influence. It's about a strength, a show of strength. It's about kind of a continuation of supposed communism to a degree, but more than that, ongoing kind of a economically liberal support, which China will gladly swallow up.
In the meantime, security forces deliberately run a vehicle into protesters. 5, we believe, have died. Are we going to continue to see these kinds of scenes indefinitely? I think, first things first, let's clarify. Aung San Suu Kyi is one of maybe 10,000 prisoners that have been taken since the coup happened on the 1st of February. The incident that you're talking about a military vehicle ramming into protesters is one of dozens of cases of similar types of situations. The military using or opening fire on protesters or on ethnic people is again one of many examples of this happening. And
it's a grim answer that I'm going to give you, unfortunately. If you look at this military's history, it's been doing this for 50 plus years. Any coup, and I'm talking about the 1988 coup, for example, also 1988 demonstrations, as opposed, and also this 1st February onwards, this civil disobedience movement that we it's been kind of termed as, is not really going to change any of that until and or unless China removes its power or its influence over Myanmar, or B, if the international community actually, rather than saying words, actually does something. I'm not talking about intervention or anything or any sort like that, but an absolute kind of disregard, an absolute a ban, a sanction, if you like, on the military and on any of their assets and any of their movements, and absolute embargo on any type of trade that might happen between nations. That's the only way that this military will be able to understand that its grip on Myanmar is loosened. But the reality of it is that the grip has not been loosened, unfortunately.
I mean, with such a brutal regime, will the citizens continue to resist? This is something, as you say, they've known since the beginning of time. Is there an expectation that more resistance will eventually yield change?
I mean, that's the hope, right? That's the great hope, that so long as the people are resisting and so long as there is some degree of pushback against the, absolute rule, if you like, of the military, that yes, that there will be some change. What's more likely to happen, unfortunately, I think, is that Burma, Myanmar will just simply kind of get used to, once again, how the military leadership is. There'll be probably more violence. There'll probably be more examples of what we saw at the weekend in terms of open firing on civilians, and that will essentially bring or lower the dissenting voices, I suppose. But I mean, it is positive signs. What you're reporting, your VT just said tonight. People across Rangoon, especially Yangon, the capital, are still banging their pots, and that's a symbolic kind of resistance almost that everyone has been partaking in since the beginning of the coup on the 1st of February, every night at 8 p.m. And so, there definitely seems to be some sort of tidal shift in terms of people's expectations and people's, unrelenting approach towards opposing this military rule. The opposition, if you like, is an organized opposition now. There is such a thing as the National Unity Government. There is some leadership amongst them as well. There is a good level of organization. They are beginning to get more and more traction across the international community. And I think this is really an advocacy point for the NUGs, that so far as they can continue to get legitimacy from within the realms of global politics, then there is a chance, there is a hope that this military can be dismantled, and that rule back to the people can be established.
Mabrur Ahmed, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very, very much indeed. Your insights always greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to speak to you again.